Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. This Mary, whose brother Lazarus now lay sick, was the same one who poured perfume on the Lord and wiped his feet with her hair. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, "Lord, the one you love is sick." When he heard this, Jesus said, "This sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it." Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, "Let us go back to Judea." "But Rabbi," they said, "a short while ago the Jews there tried to stone you, and yet you are going back?" Jesus answered, "Are there not 12 hours of daylight? Anyone who walks in the daytime will not stumble, for they will see by this world's light. It is when a person walks at night that they stumble, for they have no light." After he had said this, he went on to tell them, "Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going there to wake him up." His disciples replied, "Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better." Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So then he told them plainly, "Lazarus is dead, and for your sake I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let us go to him." Then Thomas, also known as Didymus, said to the rest of the disciples, "Let us go also, that we may die with him." On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed at home. "Lord," Martha said to Jesus, "if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But now I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha answered, "I know he will rise in the resurrection at the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live, even though they die, and whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this?" "Yes, Lord," she replied. "I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God, who is to come into the world." After she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher is here," she said, "and is asking for you." When Mary heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet entered the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. When the Jews who had been with Mary in the house, comforting her, noticed how quickly she got up and went out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. Jesus wept. Then the disciples said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind have kept this man from dying?" Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. "But Lord," said Martha, the sister of the dead man, "by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days." Then Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe you will see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Then Jesus looked up and said, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" The dead man came out. his hands and feet wrapped with strips of linen, and a cloth around his face. Jesus said to them, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go." Therefore many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. The Gospel lectionary this week was from John chapter 11, the story of the raising of Lazarus. I want to share some thoughts from what Wayne Stiles wrote on his blog. So I want to share the words of Wayne Stiles in this little message. When Mary and Martha sent messengers to Jesus about their brother Lazarus's deathly sickness, the Lord responded, "This sickness is not to end in death, but for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified by it." After the message went out, Jesus delayed for 4 days. During those final hours when their brother's life ebbed away, Mary and Martha must have wondered, what's keeping Jesus? Jesus finally did arrive in Bethany 4 days after Lazarus had died. 4 days. Jesus took his sweet time showing up. Martha's first words to Jesus revealed her expectations of him, her shattered expectations. "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." Sometimes it feels like God takes way too long to answer our requests for help and relief. He could stop all the pain, all the confusion in a moment. He could meet the need, but sometimes he delays. Now, of course, in the events that followed, Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. This story reminds us how blessed we are when the Lord loves us enough to allow pain with results that will ultimately benefit us far beyond what immediate relief ever could. Sickness dwells as part of our fallen world. Even after we make it through our current crisis, and we're going to make it through it, we will still live in a world of sickness and death. But it's a world in which Jesus came and healed sickness and raised the dead. In doing so, as in the case with Lazarus, Jesus gave a preview of what he'll do one day on a cosmic scale. Revelation 21:4 says, "There will no longer be any death. There will no longer be any mourning or crying or pain." That is biblical hope. Today, fear has gone viral in our world, maybe even more than disease. When fear rules our hearts, we focus on self-preservation. Fear is contagious, but so is hope. Jesus' ministry of miracles, including his own death and resurrection, gives us the privilege to decide what we will allow to control us, fear or hope. We need to watch that we don't share the coronavirus amongst each other, but we can share a contagious hope. I encourage you in these days, through phone calls, letters, to the people in your household, to your children, to your parents, to your friends, your brothers and sisters from church, your co-workers, share hope.